This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Making breeding decisions and sorting through dozens of selection indices can lead to headaches for many. K-State professor and head of the Eastern Kansas Research and Extension Centers, Bob Weaber, played a role in creating a web-based tool to help producers avoid those headaches. He joins us to discuss the recently released iGENDEC tool. Also ahead, K-State Ph.D. student in swine nutrition, Ethan Stas, shares insight on his research with nursery pigs, analyzing the impact of acid binding capacity, otherwise known as ABC4, to combat elevated stomach pH, which can lead to numerous issues in swine. With forage in short supply, K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk encourages producers to work with their nutritionist to extend the forages they currently have on hand in this week's milk lines. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by Bob Weaber. He is a professor and the head of the Eastern Kansas Research and Extension Center here at K-State. And he's joining us today to talk through a new tool that he has been a part of putting together. And it's called the iGENDEC tool. So, Bob, thanks for joining us.
You bet, Samantha. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. So let's start with kind of the purpose of this web-based tool.
The iGENDEC software is actually a platform for genetic decision support, and it's really a customizable selection index platform. So producers, cow-calf producers or seed stock producers can go in and build out a selection index or a weighting of genetic predictors that fits their specific production scenario and use that to make better bull selection decisions.
Excellent. So a really valuable tool. And tell us a bit about the tool's creation, because I know several people were a part of it.
Yeah, so the project actually stemmed out of a USDA grant that was led by Dr. Matt Spangler at the University of Nebraska. Matt and I worked together a lot in my role as a genetics extension specialist here at K-State. And so Matt put together a team that included myself and then a couple of researchers, Mark Thalman and Larry Keene at the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center, Clay Center, Nebraska, the USDA facility, and also Bruce Golden, who works with a company called Theta Solutions, and he was the programmer. So, yep.
Excellent. So a tag team effort here in terms of getting it all put together. And you kind of hinted at this earlier when you were describing the tool itself, but who really is the ideal user of this tool? Yeah,
so the ideal user of this software is really two different groups of people, but they're connected. So one of those is ultimately seed stock and cow-calf producers. They can use the tool to build these customized selection indexes. And the other group is really beef cattle seed stock organizations or breed associations. So those organizations have historically published sort of standard or breed-wide selection indexes that have, some broad generalized assumptions to them. iGENDEC was created with the idea of those broad selection indexes may not capture the nuance of a particular individual producer that may have different input costs or marketing goals and so forth. And so iGENDEC allows the user to kind of drill back and customize the base assumptions in terms of pricing, production scenario, and so forth, and endpoint really, to make that selection index really customized to their specific production instance.
Absolutely. And when anybody thinks genetics, I'm sure, your head could spin just thinking about the number of tools. So this tool specifically, what kind of options are there to look at? What information does it hold?
Yeah, so really the main idea of this, so when we submitted the CARE grant or Critical Ag Research and Extension grant, was really to pull existing knowledge and information together into a platform. So it provided a full solution for producers. And the idea was really to make it as customizable as somebody wants. And so there's some base data in the index, but really you can go in, and the key things to think about are as a producer when you're building out one of these indexes is really you want that aligned to revenue generation or your marketing endpoint. So in this particular case, iGENDEC interrogates you about what your marketing endpoint is. Do you sell calves at weaning time, or do you retain ownership and sell them at slaughter, or at the end of the feeding period? What kind of endpoint do you use to collect revenue? some cull cow data in there as well. And then the other critical components are breed composition of your existing cow herd and what breed of bulls you're considering using in the index. And then also, do you keep replacement females out of those breeding decisions, or do you purchase those onto your farm or ranch? So with those pieces of information, we can really provide really high quality selection tools in the instance of one number to rank these bulls on versus, most breed associations today release, a dozen or more EPDs that producers have to kind of individually sort through and figure out what's the best decision. The selection index economically weights the appropriate EPDs in that selection objective and produces a single number for producers to use in the evaluation of those bulls. So it weights and evaluates the trade-offs between, say, improvements in calving ease and marbling, for example, and helps producers make insightful decisions.
Absolutely. Takes the guesswork out of a lot of that.
That's a great way to say it. Yeah, it really does. And so most producers have sort of what I call the seat of the pants approach to selection, right? So they have an idea of, I'm trying to improve growth performance or carcass merit, blah, 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 whatever. But it's hard to conceptualize the trade-offs between, say, improvements in calving ease versus improvements in growth rate and what impact that has on the correlated feed intakes and cow longevity and all those sort of things. Well, this model, it's a stochastic model, and it models a cow herd in the background, so it's a bioeconomic simulation. So it takes a little while to run. Once you get the parameters all set, it goes and simulates production of your cow herd. You can evaluate it in a short time period or a longer time horizon and see what impact those decisions have on the selection index.
So super useful and timely tool, considering that we're seeing our herd experience a lot of shrinkage right now.
Right. Yep.
So how might a producer that's, I have a herd that's continually getting smaller, how might they make the most of this?
Yeah, so I think one of the real benefits of it is sort of evaluating that decision stream and placing the selection pressure on the appropriate traits, right? So one of the real challenges is, we get bombarded with information in our industry, and sometimes keeping, real laser focus on our selection decisions is difficult, right? So sometimes, we get pulled into making decisions on traits that we don't have a direct opportunity to capture. And so the selection index helps us keep focused on those traits that are important. And I think one of the things that producers are experiencing right now, particularly with the drought, is trying to figure out, okay, if I'm going to keep replacement heifers, how do I do a better job selecting females and the bulls that produce those females into my herd that have excellent maternal characteristics? And we're in a position in the beef industry where we have a lot of value driven out of end product. And so it's easy to put a lot of attention there and neglect, if you will, a little bit of the maternal performance of our cow herd. And those traits tend to somewhat be a little bit antagonistic anyway. So people are kind of swinging back and saying, all right, we need to put some emphasis on, cow longevity and fertility and some of those traits. And the selection index kind of helps us do that.
Excellent. So I know that this tool is new, obviously, and you guys have recently released it. Can producers access it right now?
Yeah, so it is just recently made available. The Beef Improvement Federation is hosting the platform. Once it leaves the auspices of the grant-funded project, BIF said, hey, this is a really important industry service. Let's make sure we've got funds and capability to support and host the product. So BIF has a portal. In fact, if you just Google iGENDEC and Beef Improvement Federation, you'll find a portal. And it's really targeted right now at three audiences, if you will. So sort of breed associations to help kind of reconstruct their generalized indexes is one audience. Instructors at universities is another group. So incorporating this in animal breeding and undergraduate teaching and graduate teaching. Extension specialists can also access the platform. And then other industry participants. So breeders, AI studs, for example, other groups can go on. We offer a 30-day trial period, so you can kind of get on and play with the platform. It's not particularly cumbersome, but there's a lot of background data in terms of pricing stuff that producers need to bring with it. So it's got a little bit of a lift in terms of data if you're going to fully customize the product, but is available to the public starting roughly about the 1st of October. So it's been out almost a month. So
awesome. Well, that 30-day trial is super beneficial for producers to see if it's something they're interested in actually following through with.
Yeah, one of the use cases is really targeted at seed stock producers to come alongside their commercial customers and say, hey, let's model your production instance and then use that to go through and sort of rank that seed stock vendor's bulls to identify ones that are specifically good candidates for a particular commercial customer to purchase. So we've got a couple of seed stock organizations that are starting to look at that as a strategy to sort of help not only market their bulls, if you will, but make sure the bulls that their commercial customers get fit really well. And parallel to that, then those seed stock producers are thinking about, well, building out a selection index for their own selection to help meet those needs of their commercial customers.
Yeah, so a strategic marketing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it really helps envision kind of where we need to go in terms of selection to meet a particular customer's demand.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
It'll be cool to see where this heads into the future. It sounds like it's going to be, a heavily used tool potentially.
Yeah, we hope so. There's been several customizable indexes made available by breed associations in the past. This one's maybe a notch more sophisticated in terms of the economic simulation that happens behind and the biology that's modeled in that process, and certainly the level of customization in terms of you can put in different breed groups. It models the heterosis or hybrid vigor components in that system as well. So really an end-to-end solution for producers.
You mentioned that it's also readily available for extension personnel and then also for teaching students at the university.
Yep.
So what does that look like so far?
Yeah, so our vision's that, if we're going to build out a community of people that use this, having, engagement from the extension audience is really important. And there's a number of folks around the country that kind of have expertise in animal breeding and genetics. We want to make sure they have that available as part of their training and experience. And then, of course, from a student perspective, there's not many chances to get sort of the applied animal breeding stuff implemented outside the sort of seat of the pants approach. And so this is a great opportunity for students and faculty to explore sort of the next level of selection capabilities that we have available now.
Excellent. Well, looking forward to hearing more about that. But Bob, thank you so much for your time today.
Yep. Thanks, Samantha.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Bob Weaber. He is a professor and the head of the Eastern Kansas Research and Extension Centers here at K-State, sharing information on the iGENDEC tool that he was a part of creating. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now and joined by a Ph.D. student in swine nutrition here at K-State. His name is Stas, and he's been focusing mainly on nursery pig research, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But Ethan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, like I said, nursery pig research is kind of your area of expertise, but ABC4 is a topic that you've really been looking at. So for those listening in that might not be familiar with the subject, quite like I was, can you explain to us what that really means?
Yes, so ABC4, so typically in the swine industry, it's a common practice for pigs to be weaned right around 21 days of age. At that time of weaning, they typically have an underdeveloped gastrointestinal tract that doesn't fully develop until about 7 to 8 weeks of age. So when that pig is weaned and it transitions from a liquid diet in the form of sow's milk to a dry cereal-based diet, there's certain ingredients in the diet that bind more acid in the stomach, ultimately raising that pig's stomach pH. And an elevated stomach pH can lead to things such as reduced protein digestion. It can allow pathogens to compromise the digestive tract. So ultimately, the concept of ABC4, or acid binding capacity 4, is lowering pH of the stomach by incorporating low acid binding ingredients or avoiding high acid binding ingredients to try and improve nutrient utilization and health of the pigs.
It's a huge part of the swine industry that you're hoping to impact here through this research. And it's through feeding directly, which a lot of our impact in the swine industry is done through that. So a topic that ties in well with the research done here at K-State for sure. And in terms of what you've looked at so far, these compounds that you put into feed, what are some of those that you've really been looking at?
Yeah, so one thing that we've noticed influences the ABC4 of the diet would be your protein source. So the main protein source typically in pig diets is soybean meal, which has a relatively high ABC4 value relative to like corn. That's also a major ingredient. But in these nursery pig diets, we typically partially replace soybean meal with other specialty proteins such as fermented soybean meal, different soy products, fish meal, and then incorporate some lactose products as well to try and ease that transition onto that dry cereal-based diet. We found that specifically those vegetable proteins have a wide range of ABC4 values, ranging from negative ABC4 values all the way that are higher than soybean meal. So that's a big contributor that can affect the ABC4 of the diet. In addition, minerals, specifically limestone and calcium carbonate, have a very high ABC4 value.
I know you're only 6 months into your Ph.D. here, but you did your master's here as well. So it's almost a continuation in some ways of some of the work you did. But you started, like we just talked about, with an ingredient analysis. What was the next step after that?
So after the ingredient analysis in the lab, we really wanted to start putting this concept into diets and feeding them to pigs to see if we can see that beneficial effect that we've been theorizing. So ultimately, we developed a study. It was with 2 different levels of ABC4, low and high, and then with or without zinc oxide. So we fed those to pigs, and ultimately what we saw was when zinc oxide is taken out of the diet, that when we lower the ABC4 of that diet, we see an increase in performance of those pigs as well as a reduction in removals and mortalities.
So in terms of major takeaways, if producers were listening in and if they're thinking, well, how could I apply this to my own operation? What would some of your words of wisdom be?
Well, I would say just focusing on those major ingredients like I touched on, watching the vegetable proteins that go into that diet, watching your calcium levels, specifically limestone, but other sources can contribute to that as well. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done to develop the optimal ABC4 level of the diet, different means to get to a low ABC4 value. So it's still a work in progress, but yeah, just being aware of certain ingredients that can raise and lower the ABC4 value of that diet. You
mentioned more research that needs to be done. You're going to be doing some of that research here, continuing through your PhD. So maybe we'll have you back on in the future to talk more about that as you guys conduct that research and get the results of that. But research you've already done, you're going to be covering at the upcoming Swine Day conference, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So the Swine Day conference here at Kansas State, we have it every year. So it's just a big summary, basically, of the research we've been conducting over the year here at Kansas State, me and all my fellow graduate students. So we'll be discussing the ABC4 concept, the work I've done in the lab for ingredient analysis of complete diets, as well as some of the trials we've been conducting there as well.
Awesome. So if people are listening and they're thinking, well, hey, I want to know more about Ethan and what the research he's done is, maybe that's a good way for them to learn more.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Ethan, in terms of ABC4 and maybe, the pH of pig stomachs and things like that, if producers are tuning in and they're looking for more information, do you know of any great resources for them to check out?
Yes. So the Kansas State Swine Day website, if you go there, it has all of our research that we've been conducting, and then once the Swine Day happens in November, that ABC4 work will be available online on our website.
Well, we will have that linked in the show notes of today's program, which can be found on agtoday.net. But Ethan, thank you so much for joining us today and for speaking with our listeners.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Ethan Stas. He is a PhD student here at K-State studying swine nutrition. Before we cut to a short break, we will now hear a quick word from Ron Wilson with Kansas Profile. He's sharing insight on a new wheat processing project in rural Kansas called Amber Wave.
This is Kansas Profile. I'm Ron Wilson, director of the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development at Kansas State University. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain. Those lines from America the Beautiful seem especially fitting to describe an exciting new wheat processing project in rural Kansas. Its name is Amber Wave. This is today's Kansas Profile. J.D. Schliemann is executive chairman, and Randy Cimarelli is CEO of this company called Amber Wave. Amber Wave's parent company is Summit Ag Investors, an Iowa-based private equity firm focused on agriculture and renewable energy. The savvy entrepreneurs at this company observed that U.S. food manufacturers used wheat protein products of which more than 70% was imported. Such dependence on overseas suppliers became a problem when supply chain disruptions hit. We're a solutions provider to the food industry, Randy Cimarelli said. In this case, the solution was to generate a domestic source of wheat protein. The company began researching how to produce more food-grade wheat protein domestically while integrating renewable fuel production. In July 2021, Amber Wave found the site to do so when it purchased an existing corn ethanol plant in Phillipsburg, Kansas. The Prairie Agri-Energy ethanol plant had been operating in Phillipsburg since 2006. It will be expanded and converted for this new purpose by Amber Wave. We are building a new state-of-the-art wheat mill next to the existing ethanol plant, which will be converted to use wheat starch, J.D. explained. The protein from the wheat flour can be extracted for food and feed use, and the starch can be used for the ethanol, he said. This will produce a low-carbon biofuel, which is especially in high demand in heavily populated states like California that have standards requiring low-carbon fuels. This innovative and integrated approach can respond to multiple market needs. We're creating more value-added opportunities for wheat, which ultimately benefits the farmer, Randy said. We're also helping our food manufacturers by providing a domestic, reliable source of food protein, and our location should provide freight advantages, he said. The new wheat flour mill will incorporate the newest technology. We'll be able to make better use of water and better use of energy, so the operation will be more sustainable, Randy pointed out. We're bringing new technologies into old space, he said. Wheat protein products are obviously used in baking breads, pastas, and snacks, but they are also important in pet food and aquaculture. Furthermore, this is a plant-based protein. Kudos to Summit Ag for having the vision to convert a corn ethanol plant and broaden its scope of products in this way, Randy said. The corn ethanol plant in Phillipsburg is continuing to operate while the new wheat mill is under construction. A celebration of the new facility took place in Phillipsburg in August 2022, with Governor Laura Kelly, Senator Jerry Moran, and others in attendance. The new plant is expected to be fully operational in summer 2023. Why Phillipsburg? We looked at a number of alternatives, and this achieved the best combination of factors, J.D. said. We needed to be in a location with good access to lots of wheat production, and this is a high-quality working ethanol plant with good employees, he said. Speaking of employees, this project is anticipated to add 50 to 60 jobs to the existing 35 or so now working in the ethanol plant. In the near term, the construction process itself is having a major positive impact on the region. We are very pleased with the cooperation we found in working with the community, J.D. said. All told, this could be as much as a $300 million investment when the project is complete. It's expected to be the largest wheat protein producer in North America. That's an impressive accomplishment to find in a rural community like Phillipsburg, population 2,337 people. Now that's rural. For more information, see www.amberwaveusa.com. Now amber waves of grain can produce needed protein and environmentally friendly renewable energy in addition to a beautiful Kansas landscape. We salute J.D. Schliemann, Randy Cindermorelli, and all those involved with Amber Wave for making a difference with this innovative investment. They are creating a whole new level of value above the fruited plain. For the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development, this is Ron Wilson with Kansas Profile.
Once again, that was Ron Wilson with Kansas Profile with insight on Amber Wave, a new wheat processing project in rural Kansas. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. With forage in short supply, K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk encourages producers to work with their nutritionist to develop a diet that provides a healthy balance for the entire herd.
Today I want to visit with our Kansas dairy producers concerning the shortage of forages that we'll likely see in the coming months. As most of you are well aware, we've had a short forage season this year, and that's going to probably put some pressure on us as we move into the spring months and early summer, as we wait for that new crop to come on. So it's important that you work very closely with your nutritionist to try to decide how you're going to stretch the available forages that you have. As you look at your inventories of corn silage and maybe small grain silage that you have available, those probably need to be allocated toward your lactating cows and those animals just prior to freshening. As you think about your heifers, dry cows, and animals that are in transition prior to calving, we might want to consider some other things, especially for those dry cows and heifers. Now, how much other types of forages do you have? You may have available to you some milo stalks, maybe some corn stalks. If you have some of those materials out in the field that could still be harvested, now would be a good time to get out and get those. As we start to get fall rain and as they start to develop mold, they become less of a quality feed for us. Now, if you do go out and bale some corn stalks or milo stalks, how are you going to use those in diets? Well, number one, they're not usually super palatable, so we're going to have to probably chop them fairly fine to get animals to consume them. Just simply dumping the round bales in a feeder probably is not going to work the best for your animals. Now, as you think about dry cows and heifers, how much of these types of materials can you use in those diets? You can actually use quite a bit. Again, it depends on quality, and quality of these types of products does tend to vary quite greatly. So you're going to have to work carefully with your nutritionist to make sure that you're feeding a diet that's balanced. Corn stalks will provide the bulk as well as milo stalks. They provide a lot of fiber, not much energy, not much protein. So we're going to have to work with the nutritionist to make sure we have a properly balanced diet for these animals. The other issue with these types of products is animals tend to sort them out, not consume corn stalks and milo stalks. So making sure that we have, number one, adequate bunk space so everybody can get up when the feed is delivered. If we don't have adequate bunk space, not enough space for all animals, then those animals that are more timid will get whatever is left over, the corn stalks and the milo stalks, not much of the concentrate and other things that we put into the TMR. So now you have a problem. You have some animals that are being overfed on your dairy and other animals that are being underfed. So again, making sure that we process this to a particle size that they will actually consume it, and then making sure that we have adequate bunk space so that everybody gets a chance at the freshly mixed TMR when it's delivered is very important. You may also be able to utilize some straw in some of these diets if it's available, but again, it's probably going to be in shorter supply. Warm season grass harvest was actually pretty good, so native prairie hay is available in many parts of the state. However, a lot of that did move to the south earlier in August and September, so we may not have as large a quantities out there to purchase throughout the winter months as we have in previous years. So, word of caution. Take careful inventory of your forages. Make sure you have enough to carry you until harvest next year. If you don't, probably best to secure additional forage supply yet this fall. Waiting until after the first of the year may not be a wise choice this particular year. As we look at some of the other byproducts that we've sometimes used to extend diets, things like cotton seed hulls or cotton seed burrs could be utilized as well. Again, just watch for mold in those types of products. Other types of byproducts from the grain milling industry will probably be available, but come at a higher price than we're used to paying. So we may have to consider some of these earlier choices I talked about. Above all, I just encourage our dairy producers to make use of their nutritionists, local supplies of various feedstuffs to extend the forage supplies that they were able to harvest on their farms this summer. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for the Tuesday edition of Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.